If you've cut off your family or you're thinking about it and you lie awake wondering, am I a terrible person for this? This video is for you. In Jungian psychology, going no contact isn't just a dramatic life decision. It's often part of individuation, the deep process of becoming who you truly are, outside of the roles your family gave you, like the good daughter, the caretaker, or the rescuer. We're also going to look at your mother and father complexes, the emotional patterns that pull you back into feeling like a guilty child whenever you're around your family, and how they interact with anxious and fearful avoidant attachment. From a Jungian lens, women who cut off their family are often not heartless. They're the ones trying to end transgenerational trauma, refusing to carry the whole family's shadow in their nervous system. So in this video, we're going to move slowly and gently through why some women go no contact, why it feels so haunting and guilty, and what it might mean psychologically for you. Let's begin. There's a quiet point many adults will never speak of directly. A point when you're parked alone in your car, motor quiet, fingers gripping the wheel, looking at the home of your childhood, and it dawns on you, really dawns, that you can't just go inside anymore. Not from a lack of love, not from anger, but because something deep inside has quietly shattered in a way that can't be mended. Choosing no contact is among the most unspoken decisions a person can make. It defies every lesson we're given. Family comes first. You have one mother. Blood ties can't be broken. In a culture where family loyalty is held as a kind of sacred rule, stepping away feels less like a choice and more like a violation, a moral failing, a border you were never meant to cross. Yet studies suggest that over a quarter of U.S. adults are now cut off from at least one relative. Millions who face the ones who raised them and admitted, "I can't keep living inside this bond any longer." Maybe the real issue isn't why they walked away, but what depth of hurt makes such a forbidden act the sole way to stay whole. In this video, we'll explore the actual psychology behind going no contact, the cycles, the injuries, and the reality most families never confront. If you've ever doubted your own story, this explanation may offer the clarity, vocabulary, and recognition you've been missing. Let's start. Estrangement doesn't arrive with one loud crash. It arrives in the stillness, in the slight instances nobody else catches. People often think family ruptures are triggered by a huge blow-up, a holiday screaming match, a clash over beliefs, a missed milestone. But in nearly every genuine case, the last straw is never the weightiest. It's just the final one laid on a spine that's been bending for years. Family estrangement is a slow smolder, a gradual wearing down that happens across years. It starts with flashes so faint you hardly notice. The belittling remarks, the invasive queries, the emotional dismissal dressed as concern. Alone they seem trivial. Together they create a terrain of constant strain. You adapt. You make yourself smaller. You numb the clench in your gut each time they say your name. This is what experts call death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's not the single strike that undoes you. It's the recurrence. Then one ordinary day, a minor thing occurs. A demeaning quip, a line overstepped, a flicker of disregard. So routine it feels rehearsed. But this time, a quiet voice inside says, "No more." Not because the event was new, but because you are. By the time distance is visible to others, the reality is plain. The bond has been fading in silence for ages. The end moment is just the part outsiders choose to witness. In functional families, there is room, emotional, mental, and relational room between parent and child. Room to disagree, room to have separate feelings, room to grow into a distinct person. But in enmeshed families, that room vanishes. Enmeshment isn't noisy. It isn't theatrical. From the outside, it doesn't resemble harm. It feels like being held so close you start to suffocate. It feels like a parent who says, "I understand you better than you do," or, "If you cared for me, you'd comply." It's the vanishing of borders, the psychic blurring of two selves into one. Your feelings become theirs. Your decisions become their concern. Your existence becomes a branch of their own. And here lies the hidden injury. When you attempt to separate even in tiny, harmless ways, it sparks fear or fury in the parent. Picking a different path feels like treason. Drawing a line feels like defiance. Harboring private ideas feels like desertion. Family systems experts term this a failure of differentiation, the capacity to stay linked without being absorbed. In enmeshed homes, closeness requires the surrender of self. In time, the child absorbs a crushing truth. I can remain in this bond, or I can be who I am, but I cannot do both. That awareness is often the first silent move toward estrangement, long before the phrase, "no contact," is ever uttered. Before anyone cuts contact, there is almost always a long, unseen history of trying to repair the bond. Careful talks, thoughtfully crafted messages, apologies whispered late that you shouldn't have had to offer. Most grown children don't leave without effort. They leave because effort leads nowhere. Therapists call this the reconciliation loop. Hope, discussion, fleeting tenderness, backslide, hurt again. It often repeats countless times over years. You explain calmly how their words land. For a blink, they seem to listen. They might say sorry or act more tender. Then, almost on cue, everything reverts. The same judgment returns. The same limit is breached. The same sore spots are reopened, as if the talk never occurred. Joint therapy seldom helps, not because therapy is powerless, but because emotionally undeveloped parents often treat it as a stage. They perform perfectly in the office, then reinterpret the session later. The therapist took my side. You were being dramatic. Eventually, the child reaches a painful certainty. There is no way to phrase it that makes them hear. No tone soft enough, no wording cautious enough, no depth of affection deep enough to shift them. And when repair fails repeatedly, distance starts to seem less like desertion and more like self-preservation. If exiting a harmful parent were purely logical, most estrangements would occur in youth. But they don't. They often unfold in someone's 30s, 40s, even 50s. Because the tie between child and unfit parent isn't reasoned. It's biological. It's survival. Trauma bonding forms when care and threat come from the same source. When solace and ache arrive in the same tone. When the parent who harms you is also the parent you must hold on to feel secure. This forges a potent neural circuit. Pockets of warmth release dopamine. Pockets of dread release cortisol. And your nervous system grows accustomed to the rhythm. Not because it feels good, but because it feels known. To endure inside this emotional whirlwind, many children craft what psychologists term a fabricated self, a persona built to maintain calm. The subdued child, the pleaser, the mediator, the caretaker, the in-house counselor. Some become parentified, bearing grown-up duties long before their minds or hearts are prepared. They become the solver, the emotional buffer, the one who soaks up the disorder so others can cope. And when a child is praised only for how they serve the parent, their authentic self starts to fade. But adulthood has a way of revealing what's real. A steady partnership, a first child, a therapist's observation, a single wave of weariness, and suddenly the fabricated self fractures. You find yourself asking, who am I when I'm not managing their mood? Why do I feel so unsettled around the people who claim to love me? Leaving takes lifetimes, not because the hurt is unclear, but because the attachment is etched deeper than the scar. And severing that tie feels like tearing out a piece of your own past, your own sense of self, your own youth. Yet for many, it's the only path to finally inhale fully. For most, setting a limit is straightforward. You say, "Please don't talk to me like that," and the other person adapts. But in toxic or emotionally stunted families, a boundary isn't heard as a request. It's heard as an assault. This is where narcissistic injury occurs, the profound, sudden sting a parent feels when their child suggests they are less than ideal. A healthy parent can reflect, a wounded parent cannot. They don't hear your words, they hear their ego's translation. You're a terrible mother. You failed as a father. You are the issue. And because that feels unendurable, they react with a predictable defensive sequence known as DARVO. Deny. I never did that. Attack. You're too fragile. You distort everything. Reverse victim and offender. After all I've given, this is my thanks? In that instant, dialogue becomes futile. You are trying to resolve a relational problem. They are trying to guard a fragile self-view. You speak from experience. They speak from injury. A simple, healthy limit like, please lower your voice, becomes a combat zone. A moment meant to build safety twists into a conflict you never sought. Over time, the child learns a draining truth. There is no degree of calm dialogue, no gentle enough tone, no ideal script to make a wounded parent hear a boundary as anything but treason. And this is often where the earliest whispers of estrangement take root. If you read any estranged parent forums, you'll notice the same phrase recurring. I have no clue why my child cut ties. But when you hear the adult children's accounts, their narratives are nothing alike. I sent a long letter. We met for hours. We attended therapy for a year. So why do so many parents claim they were given no explanation? Psychologists call this the phenomenon of the missing reasons. Not because reasons weren't offered, but because the parent's psyche rejects holding them. When an adult child says, "You hurt me," the words don't enter neutral space. They crash into the parent's self-concept. I am a good mother. I am a devoted father. Anything challenging that identity creates intolerable cognitive dissonance. To ease that discomfort, the mind performs a kind of emotional deletion. Not a deliberate falsehood, a subconscious revision. There are three common forms of this erasure. 1. Distortion, warping the story until it's unrecognizable. 2. Minimization. It wasn't serious. You're too sensitive. 3. Projection. Your spouse poisoned you against me. The parent recalls the emotion, not the cause. They remember the tears, but not what prompted them. They remember the confrontation, but not the years of ache that built to it. And when the child finally chooses space, the parent's mind seals the narrative shut. They left without cause. It becomes the last dismissal, the final evidence that reconciliation is unreachable. Before anyone goes no contact, they almost always move through something more elusive, a psychological cage built from fear, duty, and shame. Therapists call it FOG, and it clarifies why so many adults remain in damaging family webs far longer than they wish. Fear is the first lock. Not always fear of physical harm, though that happens, but fear of emotional payback. Fear of being ridiculed, fear of being penalized with quiet rage, outbursts, or humiliation. In many homes, love is transactional and approval is a tool. You learn young that straying from the script means losing security. Then comes duty, the conviction that you owe your parents your fidelity simply because they raised you. In American life, this duty is often framed as a moral mortgage. After all I gave up for you, it doesn't matter how unhealthy the dynamic is. You are supposed to remain, to accommodate, to yield. But the strongest lock is shame, because shame doesn't just steer your behavior, it steers your self-worth. It murmurs, you're selfish, you're unappreciative, decent children don't leave. And when a parent wields shame as an instrument, the child loses trust in their own emotional truth. Fog traps people long after the bond has turned harmful. It persuades you that leaving makes you cruel and staying makes you noble. But the reality is simpler and starker. Fog isn't love. It's control rendered invisible. And seeing it is often the instant the cage door first begins to creak open. When someone cuts contact, outsiders picture liberation, a neat split, a bold escape, a new beginning. But the truth is quieter and weightier. What follows often starts with a sorrow that has no label. Not the grief of death. There's no service, no rights, no meals left at your step. This is ambiguous loss. A mourning where the person is living, yet the relationship is not. You grieve two absences at once. The parent you actually had and the parent you needed but never got. This grief is complex because it holds shame, relief, sorrow, and understanding simultaneously. One moment you feel unburdened, the next you feel like the most awful child alive. Healing starts with allowing both to be true. But something else occurs, something most don't anticipate. Your body begins to shift. For many survivors of toxic family structures, the nervous system has lived in low-grade alarm for years. And when the stress source is removed, the body responds before the mind. Your shoulders relax. Your breathing eases. You sleep more soundly than you have in ages. Stomach knots loosen. Chest tension melts. This is somatic release. The nervous system finally unclenching after a lifetime of bracing. And in that new space, something fresh begins. Reparenting the self. Reparenting isn't about condemning your parents. It's about learning to offer yourself what was absent. Affirmation without strings, limits without penalty, care without dread. It looks like saying, "My feelings are valid," choosing self-compassion over self-blame, allowing rest without remorse, building a circle of people who don't ask you to vanish to be accepted. In time, you start reconstructing an identity not molded by fear or duty, but by intention. You uncover your likes, your voice, your emotional range, parts of yourself buried under survival instincts. The paradox is this: estrangement cracks you open before it lets you breathe. But the breath, once it comes, is real. It becomes the ground where a new, sturdier version of you can finally take root. The truth about estrangement is this: you don't walk away to punish. You walk away because your soul can't live inside a connection that won't evolve. No contact isn't a lack of love. It's the choice to stop offering yourself up in its name. It's picking reality over pretense, calm over storm, a tomorrow over a wound. And yet many who take this step carry a lingering dread. Does this make me the bad one? But choosing yourself isn't cruelty. Setting limits isn't betrayal. Healing isn't ingratitude. Sometimes the most courageous act a person can do is stop leaving themselves behind to maintain a fiction that was never real. So if you're on this road or quietly weighing it, hold this close. You are not alone. You are not cold-hearted. You are someone who finally decided your life deserves security, respect, and something gentler than mere survival. There is a beautiful existence beyond the shame. A life where you're permitted to be without fear. If this video helped you feel understood, I hope you'll stay. Subscribe for more psychology explorations, recovery dialogues, and the conversations we're rarely taught to have. And if it feels safe, share your experience below. Someone out there may need your words to feel a little less isolated.